What does it feel like to be replaced? Not loudly, not with cruelty, just quietly, by someone who once made you feel like the only person in the room, and now looks at you like you're a stranger. If that question hits something in your chest, stay here, because what you're about to learn isn't about getting them back. It's about why your nervous system has been in survival mode since they pulled away, and the quiet three-part pattern that's been proven to stop the cycle entirely. Here's what almost no one tells you. The avoidant didn't lose interest in you. They lost the feeling of safety. That's a completely different thing, and your body knows it, even when your mind tries to convince you otherwise. When an avoidant starts to pull away, their attachment system shifts into a state called deactivation. The doorway inside them that once opened to you quietly shuts, and suddenly the texts get shorter, the plans get fuzzier, and warmth turns into something you can almost feel going cold. This is the moment most people lose themselves. They try harder. They become softer. They send the second text, the third, the carefully worded message that tries to sound unbothered but reads like a held breath. And in that moment, without realizing it, what they're really doing is performing emotional pursuit dressed up as patience. This isn't feminine energy. It's anxious energy in a feminine wrapper, and the avoidance nervous system can feel it from miles away. Because here is the part that breaks people. The avoidant didn't leave because you weren't enough. They left because the closeness itself started to register, somewhere deep in the body, as a kind of quiet suffocation. Not to them. To the part of them that was trained, long before you, to treat love like something that could trap them. And instead of staying long enough to feel that old fear, their attachment system simply flipped the switch. They didn't choose to leave. Their nervous system chose for them. So they leave a breadcrumb, a short reply, a late-night ping, a thinking of you that lands like a soft hand on your back and disappears before you can turn around. And you feel it, that little jolt of hope, that flicker of maybe, that dangerous belief that if you just wait a little longer, or text just right, or stay perfectly calm, they'll come back fully. But here's the trap. Every breadcrumb is not an invitation back into the relationship. It's the avoidant getting the comfort of connection without the cost of being present. It's a tiny hit of closeness their nervous system is willing to risk because the full dose still feels like drowning. And you, standing on the other end of that breadcrumb, become the one trying to decide. Do I respond? Do I wait? Do I pretend I didn't see it? Do I send something vulnerable in return? Each decision you make in that moment is being quietly read by their attachment system, and each one tells them something different. If you chase, you become predictable. If you vanish, you become a memory. But if you do something else, something almost impossible to do without it being a performance, their entire deactivation strategy has to recalibrate. That something else is what this video is about. There are 3 moves. They look like withdrawal, but they're really acts of self-regulation. 3 quiet shifts in your behavior that interrupt the breadcrumb loop without punishing the person handing you the crumbs. None of them involve playing hard to get. None of them involve manipulation. None of them involve being cold. In fact, the third one almost requires the opposite. We'll get to that. The reason these moves work is not because they're clever. It's because they are the exact opposite of what an avoidance nervous system has been trained to expect from closeness. When you pursue, their system reads more pressure, more entrapment, faster exit. When you perform detachment, their system reads threat, unfamiliar, unsafe. But when you become genuinely quietly grounded, when your nervous system stops running on their timeline, something almost happens inside them that they haven't felt in a very long time. Their attachment system, the one that has been on lockdown, starts to flicker back online. This is why women say that the moment they stopped chasing, the avoidant came back harder than ever. It's not magic. It isn't a trick. It is plain attachment psychology, the kind of insight that once you see it, you can't unsee. The most important thing you're going to learn in this video is this. There is one move in particular that almost no one is willing to do, not because it's hard to perform, but because it asks you to sit with the very thing the avoidant has been running from their entire life. Quiet, stillness, the willingness to be okay without them. And that move, the one that feels like nothing, is the one that does the most. To understand why these three moves work so well, you first have to understand the strange psychology behind why breadcrumbing works at all. Because once you see the mechanism running underneath it, you'll never be able to respond to a breadcrumb the same way again. Breadcrumbing isn't a strategy. It's an attachment reflex. One that runs underneath the conscious mind the way your knee jerks when it's tapped. To understand what it looks like from the inside, you have to understand that there are two very different versions of it, and most people mix them up. The first version belongs to the dismissive avoidant. These are the ones who disappear in a clean, almost surgical way. They go quiet for weeks, then surface with one warm sentence, then vanish again, leaving no trail. Breadcrumbing from a dismissive avoidant isn't about wanting you back. It's about clearing a debt their conscience won't let them ignore. Somewhere underneath the silence, they know the relationship wasn't nothing to you, and the breadcrumb is the quietest Pavel's way of saying, I didn't forget you without saying come closer. Their attachment system has an on-off switch, and it sits in the off position most of the time. The breadcrumb is a flick of the dial, a momentary wobble, nothing more. The second version belongs to the fearful avoidant, and this is the one most people mistake for hope. The fearful avoidant breadcrumbs because they genuinely want you, and they genuinely fear what wanting you will cost. Their nervous system has two doorways running at the same time. One marked closeness feels like home, and another marked closeness is where I always lose myself. They slam one open, hold it for a moment, then slam it shut before anything dangerous gets inside. A breadcrumb from a fearful avoidant reads warm. It sounds tender. It sounds like a confession. But inside, it's a nervous system bracing against its own wanting, settled into the only bandwidth of connection it can currently tolerate. And that's what almost everyone misses. The breadcrumb isn't a lie, it's a ration. A small, carefully measured dose of intimacy their system considers safe. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because the breadcrumb is real warmth inside a nervous system that can't take the full dose. So when you respond to it with your full dose, the long reply, the emotional confession, the I miss you too, followed by the paragraph explaining what you meant, something in their system panics. Not because of how you said it, because of how much you meant it. The sheer volume of emotional signal your body is putting out registers in their nervous system as land stretching out, no horizon visible, no exit door. And so they do the only thing their deactivation knows how to do. They retract, they go quiet, they wait for the pressure to dissolve. They offer another breadcrumb a few days later, smaller, this time just enough to ease a guilt that's quietly been growing since the last one. And the cycle tightens. This is intermittent reinforcement, and it is the exact same mechanism that makes slot machines irresistible. The reward is unpredictable, irregular, never quite enough, and therefore compulsive. Your nervous system, on the receiving end of breadcrumbs, behaves almost identically to the nervous system pulling the lever. You start to live between pings. Your mood calibrates to their last message. Your day rearranges itself around the possibility that they might text, then around the reality that they didn't. You're not just hoping. You're being trained. The slow, quiet way a nervous system is trained when reward never arrives in a pattern anyone can predict. And this is why chasing makes the spiral worse every single time. Chasing tells their deactivation strategy that it's working. Every double text confirms, she's still here, I can keep retreating. Every emotional explanation confirms, she's still mine to leave. Not because they think in those words, they don't, but because your behavior is their evidence. And the avoidant nervous system is constantly, silently compiling evidence about whether closeness is safe. Disappearing acts paired with double texts become the most powerful evidence of all. That closeness equals pursuit, and pursuit equals pressure. And pressure equals the exact pressure they have spent their whole life learning to escape. But here's the part that's harder to admit. Somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the silence, beneath the breadcrumbs, beneath the deactivation, their nervous system is doing something else. Something they would never admit to the conscious mind and probably can't. It is watching. Not your words, not your timing, your nervous system, your steadiness, your temperature, the way you carry yourself when they go cold. Because the avoidant spent their entire life learning to detect emotional emergency in other people as a survival skill. They had to. They grew up with it. Somewhere in their earliest relationships, emotional emergency was the weather. And even now, decades later, their body is still reading the room, reading you. When you chase, they read emergency. When you perform cool, they read trickery. But when your nervous system, not your performance, your actual bodily state, stays on its own axis, regardless of what they did or didn't text, their ancient weather detector flickers. Because that's not a temperature it has ever encountered from someone who loved them. It doesn't know how to file it. It doesn't know what to call it. And so it does the only thing a confused nervous system knows how to do. It waits, half curious, half hoping you'll break pattern, and half terrified that you won't. What's strange is that the response their nervous system craves most is the one they've trained you to believe is wrong. What does feminine energy actually look like when it isn't responding to someone else's nervous system? That question is uncomfortable because most versions of it you've been handed were built for an audience that doesn't exist. You were told to be softer, cooler, lighter, less. And for a while, the advice felt like relief, because softening usually means stop bothering them, and you were already exhausting yourself trying not to bother them. But what was sold to you as softness was really a kind of slow self-erasure dressed up as grace. The truth is harsher and kinder at the same time. Grounded feminine energy, the kind that actually shifts an avoidant out of deactivation, has nothing to do with how quiet you make yourself. It has everything to do with how settled your interior is when their silence arrives. A nervous system that is settled receives a breadcrumb and feels the warmth of it, feels a small flicker of gladness, and then, because it's settled, keeps walking. Doesn't text, doesn't wait, doesn't rearrange its evening. The doormat is already on the floor, the dinner is already on the table, the book is already open. The breadcrumb came in, was appreciated for what it was, and did not reroute the day. Not because the day is more important, because the day is your life, and your nervous system was the operating system long before they were ever in it. The anxious soft version, the one so many women were taught was feminine, does the opposite. It receives the breadcrumb and instantly configures itself around it. The day folds. The mood reorganizes. The self goes on pause while the body rushes to assemble the perfect reply. This reads, to an avoidance nervous system, as something very specific, not warmth, not safety. Relief. They feel the relief in your reply and their system files it under she was holding her breath. I just released it. That's not intimacy. That's pressure with mascara on. The distinction isn't slight. It's the difference between a nervous system that loves from a place of fullness and a nervous system that loves from a place of scarcity. The first is what attachment researchers call earned secure behavior. The second is preoccupied attachment wearing heels. And avoidance, both dismissive and fearful, read the difference from under the skin without ever naming it. Here is something almost nobody talks about. When an avoidant is in deactivation, their system doesn't actually run a single test. It runs 3. They run simultaneously, probably below the level they'd ever admit to, and they're almost always done before the first hour of your silence has passed. The first test is, will she explode? Will the silence trigger rage, drunk text, screenshots, a friend of a friend, reaching out on her behalf, an essay written at 1 a.m.? If the system registers any explosion at all, even one, the deactivation tightens. Because the avoidant body learned long before you that emotional explosions are what closeness eventually becomes. They aren't imagining it, they're remembering it. The second test is, will she disappear? Will she vanish not for hours but for days, retaliatory, punitive, conspicuously off-grid, posting carefully curated photos of laughter in unfamiliar places? Their system has a category for this one too. It files it as threat with benefits. They remain vaguely fixated, vaguely on edge, secretly relieved she isn't close. The third test is the one you almost never see written about. Will she remain steady, not performatively steady? Not I'm so unbothered captions and aesthetic indifference. Actually, biologically, internally steady. The kind of steadiness that doesn't need a witness. The kind of steadiness your ex has never produced from anyone who loved them. If their weather alarm registers that signal, that quiet, unfamiliar frequency of a nervous system that is fine, the deactivation strategy begins to bleed. because that signal is something their attachment system has no clean category for. It isn't danger, it isn't absence, it isn't pursuit, it's something older than any of those. Their body holds still for a moment, listening, not knowing what it heard. This is the actual mechanism, not mystery, not magic. Neuroception, the body's preconscious scanning for cues of safety. And the only signal that registers as safety to a person whose nervous system was trained to translate closeness as suffocation is the one that doesn't ask for anything. Which is why masculine energy tactics fail almost universally here. Cold rewards, strategic delays, the pretending game. These read as avoidant behavior because they are. An avoidant recognizes their own playbook instantly, and the recognition produces not attraction but increased distance, sometimes contempt. The signal that breaks the spell is something avoidant behavior cannot pattern match against, because it wasn't built inside the same survival logic. The hardest truth, the one almost every woman who has tried this approach eventually has to sit with, is that genuine nonchalance is not a strategy. You cannot perform it convincingly enough. The system the avoidant is scanning is yours, not your actions, and your nervous system, under long training, has become fluent in its own fakery. They will know. The only thing that works is the version that isn't trying. And the version that isn't trying is, by definition, a version of you that has stopped needing them to determine the temperature of your day. So how do you actually get there? What are these 3 moves? And why does one of them, clearly by now, feel almost impossible? The first move is the one almost no one is willing to do, because it asks for something the body doesn't want to give. Stop tracking them, not as a punishment for them, as a reversal of what the surveillance loop has been doing to you. What the loop actually does, beneath the rationalizations, is this. Every time you check their last scene, your nervous system performs a tiny reconnaissance. It re-registers the gap between when they were active and when they weren't. It rescans their story. It holds its breath over an old photo. None of those acts are neutral. Each one is your body confirming, on a low biological current, that they are still the operating system your day runs on. The avoidance nervous system, even in silent deactivation, doesn't read your actions directly. It reads the signal your body is putting out. And the signal of constant surveillance is unmistakable. It reads as, I am still wired to your timeline. I am still in the field. When that signal stops, something happens inside their attachment system that almost no model of avoidant behavior can map, because the model wasn't built for what happens when their deactivation strategy stops being efficient. They are used to leaving and being chased, used to vanishing and being watched from afar, used to their absence being a gravitational force. When their absence stops producing gravity, when their last scene stays unmonitored, their story isn't watched. Their texts aren't double read. Their nervous system encounters something almost chemically unfamiliar. The pressure they fled has actually released, not been strategically withheld, but genuinely dissolved. Their system, wired to escape pressure, now has nothing to escape from. And so it sits and waits. And slowly, in the quiet between pings that don't come, starts to feel the strange gravity of a person who no longer needs them to confirm the air. Most people cannot do this move. Not because it's hard to execute. It is hard to endure, because it requires sitting with the full weight of not knowing if they'll come back, not knowing if the silence will last another week, not knowing if your absence is registering at all. The move is, in practice, a controlled exposure to the exact uncertainty that drove you to monitor them in the first place. And that's why it is the move that does the most. The second move is the one most people mistake for the first. They think moving energy inward means performing independence, posting from new places, curating an aesthetic of unbothered. But this is the masculine energy version again, the strategic replacement, and avoidance pattern match it instantly. The real version is quieter than that and harder than that. It is the version where your time is filled not by what they would notice, but by what your body actually needs. Different rooms, different textures, different people. Not as a stage for their return, as a recalibration of the nervous system that has been running their schedule for too long. When your body starts to feel different inputs for sustained periods, your baseline emotional temperature begins to shift. You are not more attractive because of the new places. You are more attractive because the nervous system, the avoidance body scans, is now carrying different information. To their deactivation radar, you read as unfamiliar, not cold, not distant. Unfamiliar, and unfamiliar to a nervous system that has been cataloging your predictability is the thing curiosity cannot resist. This is also where grounded feminine energy stops being a concept and becomes something that shows up in the body. Women talk about it as if it's a frequency they tune into. In attachment terms, it's closer to a baseline. Yours, restored. The way you hold your shoulders, the texture of your voice when you speak to other people, the absence of that pre-frequency scan you used to do before every conversation about them. That is the version the avoidant unconsciously registers, not the photographs, the frequency. The third move is the one most people fail at, because it requires a temperament almost no one has. When the person they wanted returns, they finally ping, they finally approach. Sometimes warm, sometimes still half-guarded, sometimes in the form of a sentence so tender it nearly breaks the self-regulation you built. And the entire instinct of your body is to swing the door wide open, to rush the warmth they had withheld for months, to give them the version of you that confirms everything they missed. This is the move that undoes almost every reversal, because warmth delivered too fast reproduces the original suffocation signal. Their nervous system panics, registers pressure, and retreats again. Breadcrumb loop restarts. The distance reopens. And you are left wondering how you lost something you had only begun to recover. The actual move is slower than that, and harder than that, and surprisingly simple. You respond warmly, genuinely, not performedly, but without urgency. You are glad they're back. You are also grounded enough that their arrival isn't the temperature shift your whole day reorganizes around. You reply, but you don't escalate. You give them a sentence, not a paragraph. You suggest the next step in tone rather than in logistics. You let the conversation breathe. You keep up your own schedule underneath the conversation. You do not, for 1 second, let them feel that your nervous system had been pacing the floor. That single emotional texture, warm, present, unmoved by their reappearance, is the one signal that has been shown again and again to bring an avoidance deactivation machinery to a near halt. Because it isn't a reward to be earned. It isn't a punishment to be feared. It is the first time their attachment system has encountered a kind of love that doesn't read as either obligation or transaction. It's just here. And that is what their nervous system, beneath every defense, has been starved of. When these three moves stack, the reversal isn't a mystery. It's three predictable neurological phases. First, confusion. The breadcrumb produces no observable chase. Their absence produces no observable sulk. Their stuck weather alarm flicks back and forth, looking for the usual signal. Then, testing. They offer a second ping, sometimes slightly larger, watching to see if it registers on your radar. Sometimes a callback, sometimes even a soft apology. They are checking whether the pressure they feared is actually absent or just hidden. And when your warmth arrives, without urgency, without pursuit, without the desperate eagerness that their nervous system has been bracing for, the deactivation opens. Not because they decided to come closer, because their body, finally, no longer has a reason to keep the door shut. And this is the part they will almost never say out loud. They came back not because you were unavailable, but because, in some quiet way, you demonstrated what their nervous system has been missing since childhood. Not the warmth. The steadiness that didn't depend on their performance of closeness. They came back because for the first time, being loved did not feel like standing at the edge of something that would eventually trap them. It felt, instead, like standing in a room where they could stay or go, and neither choice would change the temperature. If they don't come back, and sometimes the most psychologically clean outcome is that they don't, these three moves still rewire something. They rewire you. The nervous system that used to run on their availability begins to run on its own. You stop being the person whose peace depends on being chosen. You become the person whose peace is structural, interior, uninterruptible. And for an avoidant, or anyone really, that kind of presence is the rarest signal in the world. Because safety, for someone who has spent a lifetime running from it, is the most magnetic force that exists.